Hello everybody and welcome to the Cyclical Investors Club YouTube channel. Today we are going to be looking at Nike stock or Nike stock depending on how you want to call it. This one comes via request in one of the comment sections, so if you have a request, just put it down in the comments and I'll get it on the list and I will eventually make a video of it. Now, if it is a stock that's in the S&P 500 and part of the S&P 500, those videos will be public here on the channel. If it's not in the S&P 500, you can go over on Patreon, and that's where I post those. And I also post them in my full investing service. And if you join Patreon, you get a big discount if you decide to join the full investing service at some point. So like all the spreadsheets and everything that I have here, you can chat with me. There's all kinds of extra stuff in the full service. And basically I'm looking at stocks most of the day, every day, and people are asking me questions about them. So Nike's a good one to get us started here. Let me see if there's anything else I needed to talk about. Oh yeah, not investing advice. This is just how I personally analyze stocks. And so I'm just sharing with you guys the techniques that I use and the thought process that I use. So we're going to look at Nike now. And the very first public YouTube video that I made on the Cyclical Investors Club was back in January of, I think it was January 3rd, 2021. And it was a sell, actually there were three stocks together, but Nike was one of the sell suggestions there. And so I want to take a look at how Nike has done since then. Let's see. So basically the very beginning of 2021, and now we're here. So that was a sell back then, and it's lost 30%, even including the dividends, I think, or maybe 27% with the dividends. So down 30% since then. Pretty good sell call. It was based purely on valuation, and whatever I do this time around will be based on valuation as well, with a little recession consideration, but it's not going to come into play too much with Nike. So so it was very good at predicting the medium term. Almost 3 years later now, which is kind of usually that's if there's not a recession, like 2 to 3 years is about, 2 to 4 years is about where you kind of start to see a valuation call start to take effect. If there is a recession, it can be quicker, or bad news, it can be quicker. But it can take a while sometimes. It can even take up to, I usually say like 2 to 5 years is kind of that target area where valuations start to really matter. But you never know the timing of when it's going to matter. So if something's really overvalued, now in this case, I mean, Nike went on to make higher highs. I mean, ridiculously higher highs if you ask me. But the market can do that. So at one point you could have been up 20% from the time that I said sell. But ultimately, valuations play out. And this one was really super duper overvalued. I mean, a 48 PE on a stock, I think it was growing mid-single digits or something like that of earnings. It just doesn't make any sense. Unless something really special happens over time, the stock price will eventually come down. So we're back at it. The stock's down 30%, but also earnings are down. I don't know, let's call it 10% maybe. If you look forward, maybe they're flat. So earnings haven't really done anything good since then. So it might not still be very valuable. I mean, if you just glance at it, it has a 30 PE. Normally, you would at least want a stock to have a 15% earnings growth rate at a 30 PE. For me, it wouldn't be attractive unless it had like a 20%. So, and we'll take a look at what the actual growth is. But I think everybody knows Nike, they're a well-established brand, great company. But the question is, is it worth the price that people are paying for it? And so let's take a look at the numbers here again. This is basically going to be the same technique I did almost 3 years ago. What we want to do first is figure out what the earnings growth rate is, okay? So I have a 6.68 earnings growth rate for it after I control for share buybacks. So they bought back about 10% of stock. That will affect the earnings per share and inflate this green number here, this green area. These numbers are right down here. Those will get inflated if a company's buying back stock because there's fewer shares. So this is earnings per share. So I like to take an adjustment for that because I really want to know how much they would have grown earnings if they weren't buying back their shares. And so I make an adjustment for that. Most people don't do that. I also I would make an adjustment for this down year. Now, a person can make the case that this single year was because of COVID related things, and I think that's probably fair. But they wouldn't normally grow 123%. So in the next year, so it looks like they pretty much made up. Like if I bet I haven't done it, but so if you add 2018 and 2019, that's almost $5 a share. If you add 20 and 2021, that's almost $5 a share. So they kind of made up for it the next year, basically. And as long as you count both of these growth years in the calculations, I think that's fair. So that's what I did. I basically looked to see if I own this business, how much earnings would I get? Could I take out over this 9-year period, taking into account the years where I didn't have as much earnings because they fell. And I also am looking forward to 2024 where they expect 15% growth. And this is the number I'm using for this year's earnings from analysts. And I don't see any reason to make an adjustment to that. I mean, I don't have a better guess than they do. So what I want to know is what rate these earnings were growing. We can look, well, I already showed you it was 6%. So FastGraphs doesn't make the same sort of adjustments that I do, and they have a 9.6. So mine's more conservative. That's because I'm including this. I'm taking out for the buybacks, and FastGraphs doesn't do that. So my earnings growth rate is more conservative. Analysts, again, are very optimistic. They were also very optimistic back here when I don't know if I have it up on here. Maybe I can. I do have it. Okay. Let's just take a peek here. They expected 385. I think I'll have to check to see if there's a stock split. 2023, they're expecting 454. So let's look at what actually happened. Was that 2023 454? So yeah, they aren't even close. None of these are $4. See, so they don't know what's going to happen. They didn't know back then. They don't really know what these years are going to be. So that's why I use the historical numbers most of the time, unless I'm trying to be more conservative. If analysts think shit's going to hit the fan or whatever, then I'll listen to them and be like, okay, they study these companies. And usually if they tell you it's going to be bad and you're not already in a recession, if you're already in a recession, usually they tell you it's going to be worse. So they're usually wrong there too. But if they tell you it's going to be bad and it's not bad yet, then I listen to them and I say, okay, they know the industry is turning down or whatever. So I pretty much always take the conservative end unless we're in a recession, and then I'm more optimistic. All other things equal. So let's take a look here. We have a 6.68% earnings growth rate. Current PE is 27 or almost 28. I do adjust this for debt just a little bit, I think. Let's see. Oh, actually, they don't really have much debt. So this is almost straight up. Pretty easy to do, really. I mean, 27 PE is a 3.57% earnings yield. So the way I think about this is if I had $100 and I bought this whole company, it would pay me $3.57 the first year that I owned it, and that would grow at the 6% rate. And then I say, okay, how much money would I earn on my $100 after 10 years? And it's something like that. Although it seemed like when I did my calculation earlier, oh yeah, I changed it. I actually gave these guys more credit than they may have deserved. So basically when you do that, you get this 10-year CAGR of 4%. It's just not growing all that fast. And the reason is because the valuation is so high. When you start with like a $3 base, right? And you grow it at that $3, keep in mind the $100 isn't growing at 6%. Only the $3 is. So you go from, I pull the first year forward, so you get $381. So it's not $100 growing at 6%. It's just the $3. So this starting earnings yield is really important. When you pay a lot for a stock, you're probably not going to get as much value back from the business as if you pay. I mean, it sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how often, you know, it's hard for me to explain it to people. So a 4.27% CAGR is what you're looking at buying today if you assume like a 6.68% earnings growth. That's still a sell for me. And I wouldn't be buying this until it was down at like 48 bucks. So, and that's the recession PE, but we don't need to use that because the normal one is right on target here. They probably don't get affected too much by recessions, it's my guess. You would think they might, but at least, nah, see, they didn't. They grew right through the last one. So that's why they're almost the same. So yeah, it's pretty simple. It would be a sell right now, and if it fell like 50%, I'd probably be a buyer. Assuming the earnings don't get worse. And it's a good company, it's just too expensive. They just aren't growing the way that they need to in order to justify the prices, especially with earnings rates rising. So yeah, Nike was a sell because it was way overvalued. Now it's just overvalued enough to sell. But it's nothing wrong with the business. It's just too expensive. So I would be a buyer. I don't think there's anything bad about it. It's just not cheap enough. Okay, that one was pretty easy, I think. I probably explained it not as good as I would have liked, but again, it's just too expensive to buy. And I will have a lot more requests, and I'll keep them coming. And subscribe if you want to check out those videos, and consider checking out Patreon or the full service, and I'll see you guys later.